Okay, Greg, I think this is going to be, as we're recording this, the last podcast of the year, probably. So we had a
Yes.
good year, covered a lot of different stuff. But for today's show, we're talking about something that you and I have been discussing for a while that we're seeing a little bit more of when it comes to some of these different criminal cases, especially the school shootings or juvenile involved type shootings like that, where
Yep.
they're starting to sort of go after the parents and holding other people responsible. So we're seeing that in Oxford, Michigan, and then now that one from over the summer of Highland Park, Illinois,
Yeah.
where they're going after his dad for signing for his
The July 4th.
firearms ID card. And so, we're seeing this and we've discussed it. I, we understand. I understand people wanting to go after everyone who's responsible for these events, and that's a part of the conversation today. Part of it too is you are on a little bit of, I would say, shaky ground legally in some of these situations. Maybe not shaky ground, but some of it's a little unprecedented. Some of it's going to set precedent, which is important, I think. So we want to talk about all this stuff, and it actually has to do with one of our listeners actually reached out and
Yeah.
asked about charging juveniles with certain as an adult, right, for certain offenses, which there's a history of that. And actually, he pointed out a specific case called Roper v. Simmons. And if you're listening, I'll throw in a little link to this website. It's called Oyez. It's pronounced or spelled Oyez, but it's actually one of the best um, Supreme Court case
I'll
websites you
agree.
can go to. You can search it. It's awesome. It links to other cases and what it means. You can read or listen to the opinions. It's really, really, really cool how they have it set up. So whoever did that, they did an amazing job. But
Oh, and
and
even the name. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
All the,
exactly. It's
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 wonderful. We
it's
love
it's
it.
it's really cool. But
Yeah.
basically with that specific case, it was this guy Christopher Simmons sentenced to death in 1993 when he was only 17. So death sentence at 17 years old. A whole bunch of appeals came from that, and then that went all the way through 2002. His appeal was rejected, but then the Missouri Supreme Court, they did a stay of his execution because the U.S. Supreme Court was deciding what was a case called Atkins v. Virginia that dealt with the execution of someone who's mentally disabled. So basically, for that case, the Supreme Court said, well, that amounts to cruel and unusual punishment. And they said it amounted to that because of Americans' shifting view of that, where it wouldn't be popular in opinion in America to execute someone who is mentally challenged. It would under the 14th or 8th and 14th Amendment, it amounted to cruel and unusual punishment. So because of that, then they did the same thing with Simmons's execution. So basically, the government argued allowing a state court to overturn a Supreme Court decision by looking at evolving standards would be dangerous. But the Supreme Court said no. These things change over time. So that's an interesting part of all these cases. A lot of them have to do with 14th Amendment typically. But the idea was, for this one is, does the execution of minors violate the prohibition of cruel and unusual punishment found in the Eighth Amendment and applied to the states through the 14th Amendment? And the Supreme Court said yes. So that would violate. So executing a minor would amount to cruel and unusual punishment. So that was sort of. I just want to mention those cases because that's
Nah,
sort
it's
of where
great.
it came from, right? And then that has to do with it, at least involving a minor, and how sometimes minors can be charged as adult for certain offenses. But in that case, well, if you're charged with this crime, you can't be executed as a minor because that would be cruel and unusual. So there's a lot of these nuances in there. And now what we're getting into with different school shootings and or different type of mass shooting attacks where it was involving a minor or someone who had a firearm, they're starting to hold responsible those around them that sort of contributing factors to these crimes, I guess you could call them, and that's what they're doing. So I want to just sort of set that up. There's sort of a long way around, but we are going to talk about all of that in here. And
Holy
so,
shit. I have a
yeah,
full page of notes when we
well,
just started.
yeah, I
Yeah.
know. Like, this started with one thing we wanted to cover it, so I figured
Right.
because a listener reached out with that specific case, I did want to hit on that because we always do like to talk about who, things that people write to us about,
Yes.
ask us to discuss. So I thought it sort of fit with this discussion. So I'm going to lay all that out there, Greg, and I'll
Yeah.
throw to you to sort of get started in the discussion.
So let's go to the street first. So I had an old orange Jeep, and I loved my Jeep. But when we got high up in the Rocky Mountains and we had any long-term river crossing, my rotor would get wet, and then I'd have to pull over at the side of the road and dry off my rotor before we went up any higher, because I was always worried that the spark and the ignition, it wasn't going to take over and the engine wasn't going to run, and then I was going to collapse at high altitude.
You threw me off at the beginning of that story just because you said we were getting high in the Rocky Mountains. That means something else now. Well, so you literally mean
it's always meant the same thing, my friend.
You literally mean.
But the reason I'm saying that is that you were like a rotor. You were firing each time it came around, and all of those things seem seemingly disparate or different, but they weren't. They're all the same thing. So let me go back to the beginning here and talk about Adam Lanza and Kip Kinkle. Okay. Adam Lanza and Kip Kinkle both had parents who bought them the very guns that they ended up using to kill their parents. Now, go do your homework. Adam Lanza,
Sandy Hook was
Sandy
Adam
Hook,
Lanza,
and Kip Kinkle was Thurston High in Oregon.
Thurston, thank you.
Back in the day, remember?
Yeah.
And so write those down, folks. We don't just regurgitate information out here for our gosh damn complexion. We want you to look some of this shit up and tie these, use the rotor and the spark analogy to tie these things together and get combustion, a combustion of an idea that you can pay forward and other things. So the idea here is that, Brian, we're constantly looking to pay somebody off for this. So when it was Adam Lanza and when it was Kip Kinkle, what did we do with Lanza? Oh my God, this is so horrible. We got to tear down the building. We went the Stephen King route. The building was evil. It's the school. Right. We have to make sure that we get rid of the school and any semblance of it. That'll stop things. So then we went with Kip Kinkle and even when we went to Columbine, take a look at Columbine. The kids from Columbine were both arrested for a number of misdemeanor crimes within the 2 years, and then the year before Columbine, all stress fractures were shown. But what did we want to do there? We wanted to say, hey, listen, we got two kids here, and it's the society, Brian, society, and it's video games and it's music. Do you see what I'm trying to say? Is that we're not good at leveraging blame or levying blame to who really is responsible.
We take a very subjective approach of how we do that. I'll blame the president for everything that's wrong in my life because it's his fault, but when it comes to something like this, it's like, well, look at all of these other people. Right?
Exactly. So in Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, Eric Harris's mom, and Dylan Klebold's mom and dad both have speaking tours and books that they wrote and all this other stuff. And this is a horrific incident. I'm not blaming anybody. Trust me, I'm certainly not victim blaming here. But what I am saying is that finally we're getting to the point where somebody's going, well, wait a minute. What about him? He bought the gosh damn thing that let the July 4th shooter actually get the guns and go out there, knowing full well that his kid had a mental problem and knowing full well that this kid was violent. Okay. And then we take a look at the other one. We take a look at Oxford. And Brian, those parents are still trying to get bond. Why? Because what's their argument on the court says, hey, you fled. We're not going to give you a bond. You fled once, you'll flee again. And they said, wait a minute, we fled because we were afraid society was going to kill us. All the people that were around Oxford School and you were publishing our photos. And so we didn't have a place to hide. So what? So the what here is when we take a look at all of those players, the stress fractures were screaming, I need attention, or I'm going to explode and blow up. And we could add Florida, we could add California, we could add so many other. And what has happened is there's been no measured response on who's to blame. First and foremost, it's the shooter that's to blame.
Yes.
But those immediate people, look at Uvalde. I don't want to stress that because everybody beats that dead horse, no pun intended. Yeah. But take a look. That kid was so bad that parents were done with him. Even Granny was saying, like, what am I supposed to do? And the schools didn't want anything to do with them. So we have to we're a culture that has to find somebody to point a finger at or a thing to point a finger at and say, that's the thing. It's the gun, Brian. It's the media. It's the
it's the drugs.
That's where I want to start. If we can.
No. And this gets to the sort of the crux of the issue here is when is assigning blame and responsibility, right? So we want to hold people accountable. We're angry, upset. Okay, everyone's feelings about it are completely valid. If that shit doesn't piss you off and make you angry, then something wrong with you, right? So okay, got it. We're all pissed off and angry, but what happens? Well, we used to have something called a lynch mob, okay, and it's not a good thing, okay. In fact,
Exactly.
the reason our justice system is the way it is because that stuff continued for a while, and we said, well, let's round them up, let's hang them, and let's get it right here. Well, a lot of those people were innocent and had nothing to do with it. So the
Yes.
idea is we get that emotion take over. So and it's always, which is I find it interesting, is how we sort of as a society or individually place blame on it, because
Yeah.
I'm never going to do it on myself, right? It's never going to be my fault or my
Exactly.
responsibility, right?
Hence why the group has to speak. Because if it was individual, it would be a monarchy tomorrow.
Yeah. So we don't want to do that, right? And then again, when something goes wrong, we look at all of these points and look at these contributing factors, and we everyone sort of subjectively picks and chooses which one is more important. And we don't, and that what the problem is, that it gets in the way of how we weigh each contributing factor, which one was more significant. But we don't start with where it actually is, right? So it's like you said, the gun's the problem, the drugs are the problem, the police are the problem. It's like, no, this person made a decision. They made a choice.
Yes.
That was a fucking choice, right? And they should be held responsible for this. Everything else after, yes, those may be things we need to improve on. Those things we need to get better. But you don't get to take it out on those people. You have to take it out on the individual. So this gets into now the legal side of it, with specifically what we talked about with, are we going after the parents? Are the parents responsible? Well, the parents are responsible. I mean, at a very basic level, legally, even the parents are responsible for the basic needs of a child. So, like, if you're meeting your child's basic needs of food and clothing and shelter,
okay,
like,
Maslow.
well, no, meaning,
I know what you mean. I'm just being a dick.
But yeah, but like I'm saying from a legal standpoint, like the state can't come and take away your kid if you're providing that. You could still be a shitty parent. You could still be a fucking asshole, but like you're providing the bare minimum for what a child needs. So legally, that's all you have to do.
Yes.
But now, what these parents do, I mean, what are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to be policing parenting and how they should be parenting? Because a lot of them don't know how to do that or have a say. Like you said, for some of these shooters and some of these kids that violently act out all the time, dude, their parents gave up a long time ago. They don't know what to do. They don't have the mental capacity or the physical capacity to even deal with it. And you know what are they supposed to do? So now they're responsible. Well, why are we, like, the debate is interesting. It's so fucking subjective to me. And this screams of me is like, if you have if they have a really good attorney, then they're fine. You know what I'm saying? Maybe not necessarily fine, but like,
which is a precedent we don't want to set. But let me throw this at you. There's somebody listening to us right now, and I want to make sure we disabuse them of what we're not talking about. There's kids in Detroit and Philly and Seattle and L.A. and Chicago, Chirac, that are out on the streets every single night shooting at each other, shooting a 14-year-old, doing this, doing that. This is not that. That is when you allow the culture and the experience and the training and the mentoring and everything else to break down in a proliferated area that's got exactly to the point where it's pre-apocalyptic in nature, and those kids don't have the sense not to be out shooting. And if we were there, one of them would take a shot at us for this podcast. You get what I'm trying to say? Okay, that's one thing. What we're talking about is the premeditated view of an individual that I'm going to take a gun and I'm going to impose my will on these people by shooting at them or killing them or threatening them or terrorizing them. Okay, two completely different standards. So one set of rules cannot help or hope to address both. Do you see where I'm going there?
I think no, and I would agree. I would look at it as, okay, if I'm going to treat it, because there's some people want to say, how is this any different, or how is that different, or we're not paying attention to this. But yes, let's say it's both of these areas. It's cancer, but they're different types of cancer. So you're not going to treat this type of cancer the same way you're going to treat that type of cancer.
Exactly right. And Brian, people with diabetes know that their tooth care is important, because if you don't take care of your teeth, your heartbeat goes up. Well, if you haven't been trained that those two things are correlated, right, you're never going to know that. And you're not going to buy that toothbrush, or you're not going to floss. And people go that are listening, the fuck is he talking about? Look, I always try to street things down. One creates the next. And if you don't know the totality of the argument, Brian, then what you do is you still run around treating symptoms,
Yep.
and you never really treat the causes. So tooth decay is a cause of heart disease, okay, and it is contributing factor to diabetes, and diabetes is a contributing factor. So when we're talking about this, what are we talking about? We're talking about a jail. So what's a jail? A person's going to spend 90 days in jail. You can spend up to 1 day less than a year in a thing called a jail. What were jails designed for? Jails were the timeout chair of history. You have exceeded your authority in this matter. You have fraudulently done something. You threw a punch at a nun. Whatever it is, you're going to jail. And what did they want from that, Brian? They wanted it to be punitive to the point where you had a fine and cost and time in jail to give you what? To cool the blood down, to think this is not the path that I want to go on.
Right.
Then the next thing was a prison. Everything a year or more over a prison, you had to spend time. You certainly didn't want to be there. What was before that? Before that, it was the penitentiary. They wanted you to be penitent.
Yeah.
They handed you a Bible. They wanted you to go in and pray on your knees for salvation. Brian, those don't work.
No.
Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
That's the thing.
So that's where I'm going with this, is that
Yeah.
you are not going to take some kid off the streets of Chicago or some kid that ate in Gratiot and tell them there's a better way than a gun. Why? Because we haven't offered them a better way.
Yeah,
we haven't
they don't know
shown them a different way.
No.
So the problem here is not them. The problem here is thrill killers, dynamic shooting situations. They try to change the terms all the time. The new thing, driving through a parade, shooting at a parade, shooting at a school. Why are they a thing? Because look, I've only had a lack of attention my entire life that shaped my formative years. And negative attention is attention nonetheless, Brian.
Right.
So I can feel powerful with a gun. If I'm a boy, it's an extension of my penis. If I'm a girl, it's an extension of my id and my ego. And guess what? It gives me instant fucking credibility when I walk into a room and go, bitches, it's on, and start capping rounds.
Yeah.
That's the problem. So that's where it's the same in both environments.
Brian. Right.
The tool becomes a means of communication.
Yes. Okay. That's a great way, is it saying the weapon or the tool in this case is a means of communication, and violence is a language, obviously.
Exactly.
And so that at that point of it, it's very similar. But to get back to sort of what then, how do we prosecute this? Who do we hold accountable for these things?
Yes.
There's a lot of accountability and shared accountability, and then we just sort of go, oh, this makes us feel better. Like, look at their parents, like look at
their teachers, or look at.
Well, we don't do that.
Well, we did though. We did when we had a shooter in Colorado. We said, hey, he fell through the cracks because we had this handy dandy system of ones and zeros, Brian, that we added to a person when they did. We did that in Florida too, didn't we? And we said, oh well, the teachers failed because they didn't articulate these problems. Then we said, wait a minute, it wasn't the teachers. It was the problem, this base system of accounting. And then we said, why? Because we're not sure who to point the finger of blame at. I like what you said earlier. First of all, the person that's most culpable, the person that's most responsible, is the person that pulled the trigger. Now, in these two cases that you cited, that'll be in the episode notes, in both of those cases, a parental figure actively took part in either the purchase of the firearm, and or the purchase of the firearm, purchase of the ammunition, training.
That was in both the Highland Park one in Illinois over the summer, and then last year the Oxford, Michigan one. They both, the dad either purchased or helped them purchase. I think for the Highland Park one, he had to sign their in Illinois they have the firearm owner's ID card or something like that. If you're not a certain age, you have to get a parental signature. Same thing. Oxford, his dad actually bought it as something. So. Yes. So, but at the time, obviously, what do we talk about? Was there any intent behind what they did? Well, no. I mean,
that's going to be the hard part.
The intent was not to support a terrorist act. The intent was to purchase a gun. Is it bad parenting? Yes, but not all bad parenting is illegal.
So what they'll say, Brian, what they'll say in these upcoming arguments, and let's call this right now, they're going to say that they knew or should have known that their action or the neglect of an action was going to lead to this trauma. And when we look at Kip Kinkle stole a gun and had that gun at school. So the teachers called him on it. The parents intervened and said, wait a minute. Listen, we don't, Kip, why'd you steal? Oh, we'll buy your own gun. You don't need to steal a gun, right? It was all leading to the close end of the funnel, Brian, the tight end of the wedge, where we knew or should have known that this was going to end in him killing himself, killing a bunch of others, and he ended up killing the parents and then going and killing, attempting to kill. Kip Kinkle was one of the good ones where the school saw it quickly enough and the students intervened and stopped it. But the point is the point. The point is that if you get your kid a driver's license and you need your kid was out driving carelessly and recklessly and didn't follow the laws and stole a car and all that shit, but you still got it, right? And in the back of your head, you're going, oh, fuck, he's somebody else's problem now, Brian. That is the type of thinking that we're addressing here. And in those instances, what else would those parents have thought when the kid says, I need a gun? What do you mean you need a gun? I mean, if your little insurgent came up to you tomorrow and goes, hey, I think I need a gun. That's wait a minute. Can you imagine that?
There'd be an all stop right there.
It would be.
Shut it down. What is going on here? No, but this goes back to it. And again, that may be bad parenting, but does it fall under liability for you knew or should have known? And there's no precedent for that.
That's the best question you've asked. Yeah.
Because
exactly.
But this is going to, I think this is going to set the precedent for this, right?
Oxford will. I think Oxford will. I love the fact
Oxford.
that they came in on the parade shooting, Brian, because it's so different in nature. But again, it's the same case. In chief, we're charging a parent.
Well, this part of the case is similar. Yeah, right? This part of the case is similar, and that's the point. Is it's not illegal to be a shitty parent unless it meets certain criteria of child abuse or neglect or whatever it is, right? And then you can be charged with that. But the idea is
you fraudulent answered a document to get the gun. Right, or you signed for the gun that was for the kid.
They didn't do anything illegal. Nothing they did was illegal. And then was it a contributing factor to what happened? Well, yes. They got them
for
the tool.
The jury to understand in this one, though.
But
that's the hard part.
But does it fall under? There's obviously they didn't have any intent. They didn't buy it thinking that they were going to go kill a bunch of people with it. Now, are we at the point societally where you can say you knew or should have known? And I think that's might be part of the argument here is as a parent, it's no longer in 2023. You have to that we have a history of these things happening in the United States. This isn't a fluke. This isn't some random occurrence that happens
and
every
it's not
30 years.
You're exactly right.
So the idea is does it fall under you knew or should have known? Well, should they have anticipated that this could have turned out poorly? Well, I would say yes, but convincing a jury of that, is a different.
So let's take a different tack, though, Brian. Let me ask you this. Let's take a completely different tack. There's I'm going to depose you briefly. There's a place in the United States called Tornado Alley. Is that true or false?
Yes, true.
Okay, yeah. So and it's so named because tornadoes frequent those areas and create a havoc and destruction. Is that true?
Yes, every year.
Okay. So would you agree that it's probably harder to get insurance in those areas and to build a home in those areas?
I would assume
some other area.
I would assume my insurance premiums would be more given the fact that that's a common occurring natural disaster in that area. Yeah, I would.
I would also agree, probably, and I would stipulate it, I think, to the fact that unscrupulous people would be able to sell property there dirt cheap because it can't be used for much if you can't get insurance for it, but people got to live somewhere. Right.
So absolutely. So there's going to be people that take advantage of it. Yeah,
you're exactly right. The standard of homes also that are there are not going to be a complete luxury home sometime. Maybe they're going to be a cheaper home that can be replaced. So why? Again, Greg, why do you come up with that? Because I'm back to trying to create a parallel in your brain for what we're talking about. Adam Lanza did not say, Mom, I think I want to be a target shooter at the Olympics. Kip Kinkle didn't say, Dad, I want to go hunting. These weapons that they bought and the rooms that they kept and the journals that they wrote all would lead a reasonable person to believe that the egg had cracked and there was a fissure and shit was sticking out of it. Just like when a dam breaks or a levee breaks, Brian, from heavy rains or a flood, we knew that this was the weak point, that this is where it was going to go. So right now, if you got a kid that's begging for the Red Ryder, know you'll put your eye out for gosh damn Christmas, You got to intervene. You're the parent. You need to intervene and go, no guns, Tommy. We're afraid you're going to
Well,
kill us. I mean, but those discussions aren't happening. Maybe this new litigation will cause us to get back to the table and have those discussions.
well,
Maybe.
it's those discussions happen in homes, but those then obviously are
What kind of
homes
homes?
where these things don't
Yeah,
happen. I mean that's the point. I mean, so
right.
it goes back to like we always say, of course, parenting or mentoring, especially at that age is the most important thing for
Yep.
that person, that community, and therefore our country, right? But
Yep.
so the idea is again goes back to these cases is what is the legal ground that they have, and are we doing this arbitrarily because it makes us feel better, or
Yep.
is this going to actually, because it goes back to the kid in a bad neighborhood, whatever urban area in the United States, whether it's Chicago, Detroit, Philly, or something like that, who that's all they grow up. They grew up in a violent community where
Yep.
everything's around guns and drugs, and this is how it happens. Like they literally do not know. They don't know any better sometimes. Are they still responsible for the actions? Absolutely, right? But
You're
but
right.
but that but that's a different case. So are we trying to? We don't go after those families when that happens. When a 16-year-old kid kills someone, in Chicago over a carjacking, they don't try to go after their parents.
Right, right, right. And my thing is that when we have the street racing that gets out of control and goes into the crowd and kills somebody, we go after those folks. Those are responsible. Why? Because their actions are careless or reckless. But we didn't go after the driver's dad, right? We didn't
Right.
go after. So we go after the auto manufacturer. We go after the gun manufacturer. We don't go after that guy's driver's training teacher in high school. So what happens is we have to define as a society those persons that are closest to the caper and how the impact, you say it all the time, Brent, what does this fix? What will this address?
Well,
What
that's what I
problem does this solve? You
that's what
see
I
where I'm
mean.
going?
If okay, if Ethan Crumbly was in the fucking
Yes.
principal's office with a goddamn gun in his backpack right before
Yes.
killing a bunch of students. Okay,
Yes.
well, that's well,
Clearly,
are we going
anybody in
after
that
them?
room on that day,
Are we going
clearly
after them?
anybody, we need to. Okay.
Because they knew more
Exactly.
about that situation. I could argue that they knew more about what was going on with Ethan Crumbly and that specific situation than his parents did, who they called on the phone,
Precisely.
who were probably in the middle of a workday or doing something. Oh, he's doing what? Yeah, no, he's fine. You can leave. Yeah, no big deal. They're not seeing the picture, right? And they could have made the call right there and had a different
Precisely.
outcome, simply searching his bag. Are we going after that? Are they going on trial? Are we going to sue the shit out of the school and the school district? Are they going to have to pay out millions? Are we going to
So
change
your
the
point,
training for this? I mean,
your
because who are we?
your point speaks directly to your question that the viewer wrote in when they were talking Roper Simmons. So Roper Simmons, older caper, 25 years probably now.
Yeah,
Kids
it was early 92.
colluded to get together to kill a female. They abducted her from her home. They drove to a bridge, threw her off the bridge. One of the kids didn't show. They were still going felony murder for the kid that didn't show because he was at the planning. They all talked about the caper. Everybody was complicit and implicit, so there was no question about the guilt. Now, why am I making a big point of that, Brian? Because it wasn't as if these kids, the Justice League or the Innocence Project, came along and said, "Wait a minute, there was a false confession." Everybody agrees, including the victims, the witnesses, the suspects
Yeah,
themselves,
yeah,
that they were guilty. The question was, can we convict somebody of a capital crime and then, even if they're a juvenile, execute them, which is the ultimate end
right,
of
right.
adjudication, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's the ultimate punishment. And the court, and we know SCOTUS, we know how
yep,
the Supreme Court is going to rule.
yep.
The court says, hey, look, kids are mixed up like a fart in a gosh damn blender.
Mm-hmm.
So they're growing and their brains are changing. And even one of the justices, if you ever read this, folks, Brian, the OEA site is an incredible site because he'll add it in the notes. It's got all these different side comments that
Yeah,
you can read.
yeah,
The idea here is that a lot of the justices look, and some of them used open source information and intelligence and said, look at all these articles on what decisions kids make poorly. And look how it's
yeah.
this age
That's
group
you.
of kids that
Yeah,
make the worst decisions
yeah.
repeatedly. Yeah. So to answer specifically the person that wrote you, my answer is kids can't make those type of decisions. And even though it looks as though they planned and they rehearsed and they carried it out, we still have to have a decision on age. So from a certain age, you're a minor, you think like a minor. That's why you can't drink. That's why you can't vote, all those things. So you shouldn't be killed. But I think an argument you brought up bears something talking about as well, because you said, and I quote SCOTUS on it, the America's shifting view. Well,
Yeah.
we all know that the Constitution is a living, breathing document, and certain things must be interpreted by each new team of humans in America. Why does that so? Because we didn't have aircraft, we didn't have flight.
Yeah. Well,
So,
there's
so
people.
the first person acting up on
there's
a plane or a
yeah.
terror act on a plane, we didn't have a
There's
precedent,
people
right?
trying to argue that it's supposed to mean this. Yeah, you're supposed to what did it mean at the time, and then how does that apply today? Like
That's the key.
You can't
So
just
the key
say,
is that,
oh, this is what
right.
it meant back then. It was like, well, they didn't have everything, so those
So
arguments
therefore,
fall
the
apart
Amish
very quickly.
punishment
But
will
yeah,
rule here.
yeah.
No, stop. So the jury, we will not have electricity while deciding this
Yeah,
case.
exactly.
Because, no, and you put it so succinctly and so beautifully. What we were supposed to do is understand the mindset and what was going on in the environment at the time, then understand the mindset and the environment now. So when they say the American shifting view, they specifically meant on mental health,
Yep.
meaning diminished capacity.
Yep.
So I think there's two arguments there. One, just being a minor, you have diminished capacity. So would you argue that when you're putting a kid in prison for the rest of his life for a shootout in Chicago, it would be different if that kid was on the streets of, let's say, London or Frankfurt, where they don't have weapons all over the place. They don't have the severe problems with gang violence and armed robberies. They do have crime. Folks, I'm not
just
getting wrong.
not gun crime, but plenty of crime.
So
yeah.
I could take that kid and I could say he suffered from PTS in his environment. Yeah. This was safety. And those capers are happening, Brian.
Yeah.
I remember getting a lot of people on the street that were murderers, and it said, right, you run them through the computer and it comes back and it said they're in Dehoko for homicide. And you go, homicide, yeah. And what happened? I was found guilty. Well, how long did you do? 6 years, 7 years? And you're like, holy shit, that's the price for homicide. And I'll tell you why that's scary to you and me.
Yeah.
You and I, within the last couple of weeks, while we were traveling, and I'm not going to say where, we ran into somebody and we were talking about training for events like this to be able to predict what was going to happen and stop it, right? And that person was bringing up Oxford and going, well, the training kind of worked, because only this many people were killed.
Yeah,
that person was wrong-minded, because they were trying to think that less is more, and because there's only 3 that were killed. Hey,
it's just an absolutely unacceptable standard.
It is, and that can't be where we start. So we're not going to arrest our way out of it. We're not going to incarcerate our way out of it. And to further answer that minor, by killing that minor, you're not creating a standard where other minors go, well, I don't want to go to the electric chair. That's never a non-argument.
Prison or any type of punitive, anything like this it's not a deterrent. It never has been.
Kid.
Maybe for some people on who were I don't know, but not for criminals, not for people who are
so
I mean, there's some people that would, I don't want to do that because it's a crime, but I don't think we're rising to those people are thinking about that with murder, right?
Certainly not with recidivists, and certainly not.
That's what I'm saying, and it's basic mathematical distribution on this. I mean, what is it, like 20% of criminals commit 80% of the crime, and then out of that 20% of them are the worst out of those 20.
Exactly, and so you're spot on. So that goes to the thinking. You said it earlier with intent. Look, people right now are getting let out of jail and having their cases expunged.
Yeah, for
because
violent offenses sometimes.
Yes, but I'm speaking specifically about marijuana. So you now people now are going, why was that ever a thing? Look, it's not that it was ever a thing. It's that it was a thing.
It was.
You knew it was a thing.
Yes.
And you still were hiding guns and dope and coming across the state line.
There's tons of things like that. There's tons of there'll be some old law from 150 years ago on the books about something small and obscure. And everyone goes, how is this? Like, look, because it never went through the process of getting changed because this situation didn't come up. Now that it came up, but like you said, no, the drug ones are a perfect example, because everyone's going like, well, this is like, there was non-violent people. They're just doing this. Okay, but at the time, this is what the law was. Now, if you want to change that now,
they knew better. Right,
that's what I'm saying. If you want to change that now and you want to commute those sentences, that's fine. But like that person's still
shifting view.
Exactly. It goes right back
Yes.
to what the Supreme Court
Yes.
says about a shifting view and how these
So I
things,
love the Supreme Court.
which is good. It's what it's supposed to be, because we go, oh, hey, that was kind of dumb. We kind of
Yep.
overreacted there. Maybe we should fix that. And then
That's the point.
we
So
also do
let's
the
not
opposite of
underreact with the shooting.
that.
Yes.
But
Yes.
we
Yes.
also are supposed to do the opposite, where we go, hey, you know what? We weren't focused on the right thing. This is where we need to focus, right? And so I don't know if this covers that, right? Meaning what
No, I
the
get you.
prosecution of these parents. It's like to me, one, it doesn't. I don't believe in some sort of punitive action simply because it makes you feel better. I mean, that's okay, great. It makes you
It's
feel
the
better.
worst. Right.
Didn't change anything. Like what is this
Yeah,
doing
it's
and
called
where's this going?
religion.
Because right, because if this sets a precedent, what
Don't get me wrong, folks.
will they
I'm
come after
highly
next?
religious, but what I'm trying to say is the reason that sometimes we deem something to be, God doesn't like this. It's written in the Bible, this and that, is to correct or create order in social masses. And
Yeah,
sometimes we look back and we go, you know what? That wasn't the right plan. That wasn't the best thing. When
right.
we came to Roanoke, sometimes we knew we had germs. That's why we were trading the blankets. So what I'm saying, and my argument is that if you knew or should have known that your actions were illegal, immoral, unethical, and you did them anyway, you've got a problem. That's going to be the hurdle, I think, Brian, for these cases to go after the parents and the caregivers, because they're going to have to prove in court that you had ample opportunities to intervene.
But
There was ample demonstrations of intent, yet you did nothing. That's
but
you stood flat-footed and watched.
the issue then with this precedent, though, if they get convicted for whatever they're going to be charging them with, I can't remember what they charged the dad with in the Highland Park one, but what can that okay, now we're hanging out, Greg, and you go, hey, let me see your Glock, Brian, and I go, oh yeah, here you go, and then you go, kill 3 people and then blow your brains out right in front of me, like, am I? Am I? No, I mean, sorry.
Are
You
you
just had me
complicit?
but
Yes,
am
you
I
are.
complicit in that? Like,
Yes.
how is that my fault? I was
Yeah.
supposed to know you were going to do that. We were just hanging out here, like
So
shoot
let's
clicking
protract
rounds
that.
off.
Let's slow it down and let's open the Hoberman and let's look inside the ball. If you knew or should have known that action, listen, in its haste, you can't argue with somebody. And that's why with a kid, you got to give that kid more time, because kids make mistakes. That's why the court is looking at that and saying, we're not going to put, first of all, if we take a look at Ethan Crumbley, Crumbley thinks he knows he's guilty. He thinks he knows why he did what it was, but he's still a kid at the end of the day. And he
Yeah.
needs the protection. He needs a bunch of lawyers and he needs a bunch of help. Killing him solves nothing and is going to solve nothing in the future. So therefore, we back up and we take a look at your example and we go, look, flash to bang was too tight. I go, hey, hand me that gun, which I can't imagine any time
Yeah.
that somebody would ask that. But there is a case where somebody did that, and then I shot somebody else and then shot myself. Now, going back for it, the intent was demonstrated by me. It was never demonstrated by you. But in juvenile capers or minors, we would say contributing to the delinquency of a minor. So you handing that minor a gun and
Right.
that minor doing that act would be illegal. But you handing it to a person that you never suspected had mental illness or anything else, that would just be a grim, horrible event. Yeah? Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, no,
there has to be a standard.
and I think that's the big part, but I don't think I understand that for the Ethan Crumbley case because he is a minor. Okay.
Yes.
But if the person isn't a minor, what if they're 18?
But if the adult, well, and that's
you get what I'm
like
saying.
Colorado, so
the
age
minor
is not
one
a good determining factor. You're then going to have to take a look and see if there were other contributing factors. But for your July 4th shooter, the question will arise with all of these, Brian, is that did I dupe somebody? Like, the federal firearms laws are in place so bad people don't get guns. Do they work? No. It's more porous than our southern border. But does it work for good people? Yeah. Most laws, almost all laws, work for people that follow the rules. But was the dad in Highland Park, was he putting his thumb on a scale to get his kid the gun, to keep his kid quiet because he was tired of dealing with them, and did it in the back of his mind somewhere, you go, man, this could turn out poorly. And if that occurred, Brian, I mean, we're talking about a bunch of ifs, but that's why we go to bench trials or jury trials. If that occurred, then it would be wrong, because it's a form of fraud, isn't it? I'm going to allow you to get, like parents think nothing of an adult thinks nothing of a kid standing outside of the local Quickie Mart. He goes inside, buys the kid a six-pack, and goes, "Hey, I was young once too." But
Yeah.
the protracted chain of events that occurs after that, you are proximate cause and responsible for your actions there. I'm looking forward to it because the Michigan courts recently said, "Hey, the place for this to happen is the Supreme Court after the trial. That's where we want your objections. That's where we want our challenges." I'm saying that we could do a lot of work up front by allowing society to understand that America's views have shifted, but let's not do a knee-jerk law. All guns are bad, all front sights, any painted black weapons all have to be frigid pink. That shit just mucks up the system. That does nothing to answer the question, what are we trying to solve here? And I
Yeah.
love the Crumbly caper. I can't wait. I
Well,
told you
that
we
yeah,
both
this
agreed that
yeah,
that's going to be a very important case.
that one, everything around it, not just the parents, but
Yep.
with what they're going to do with the school and
Yep.
the legal challenges here. Like this
Policy
is
and
going
training.
to
Yep.
this is going to be the one that changes a lot of things because of the
I agree.
again, like you said, with policies and well, we already know, yeah, with insurance companies going to be out there. But they're for a number of reasons because of simply the negligence, I think, on their part, from what we know from what we know of the case and what occurred and what the school should have done, and then now they're looking at what the
Yes.
parents should have done. So this is going to set it going forward. It's just always, what's the intent behind it? Is it to hold as many people accountable and responsible? Because it doesn't like, or is it just to continue to place blame on more people?
Right,
Wait,
right,
I mean,
right. I think your point is so important. We got to repeat that. Listen, if you're listening to this broadcast, what Brian means is if you drown in a pool and the pool didn't have a fence, Brian is saying he wants to hold somebody responsible for future pools to have fences so more kids don't die. That's what
yes,
we're talking about. I'm trying to say we got to come off of this gosh damn gun issue long enough to look at simple logic. Okay, certain things are dangerous. So if we create a path to that thing and we move things out of the way and we know that we're going to go into that danger knowingly, then we're guilty. And that might just be me, but if somebody else helps me boost into that window, if
yeah,
somebody drives me to the bank to rob it, they're guilty too. But that's not how we're going. We're going, like you said, with responsibility, finger pointing, and I want to feel better at night because I know somebody went to jail for that. Look at Uvalde. Uvalde is a perfect example of that with the payouts and this and the hate and that gosh damn posing piece of shit. What's that guy in People magazine that we were reading
oh
when we were
God,
in
yeah,
Ottawa?
yeah, I forget, whatever,
McConaughey.
yeah,
Yeah, McConaughey. Oh man, you're great, buddy.
I,
Your way
thank,
of thinking is really going
yeah,
to save lives. At the end of the day, if what you adjudicated in Uvalde for those people, if what you sued for, if what you fired people for, if what you held them their feet to the fire with, if it's not going to stop a future school shooting, and
right.
had its action not prevented that
Uh,
one, then I'm suspect. I am immediately
be,
suspect of your
because it
actions and
should
your
be,
intents.
if your goal is, hey, how do we prevent the next one from happening, or how do we make sure this doesn't happen again, and you look at
Yep,
all these things and you bring everything out into the clear light of day. I get that, but again, it doesn't feel like that in some of these cases. It certainly
it
doesn't
doesn't.
feel like that when
Doesn't
you
pass the
know
smell test, buddy.
everyone, yeah, it's like, again, the Uvalde is both a perfect example and a terrible example at the same time, because it's perfect because it's the police fault.
Right,
Like, what the fuck?
right,
Like,
right.
someone called
And the more
911 and
police,
people showed up and it's
the
their
more police
fault
that were
for
there,
what
Brian, the
happened. It's like,
worse it is. Come
well,
on,
well, that, well, so like
let's not
that's
conflate it. Right.
probably why things didn't happen sooner, was actually because there were so many people there that it actually makes it more difficult. But that's a separate,
Yes.
just sociological and psychological,
So, but let's go
discussion.
back.
But
Let's go back to that sociological discussion for a minute on social media. How many times? Look, we're not involved, folks. We have nothing to do with executive and dignitary protection. Never have, never will. Okay. We do have mindset. We do have advanced critical thinking. We have human behavior and human performance. And we got a lot of friends that have been in the industry for 40 years or
yeah, a
more
long time.
that are
Yeah,
the experts at it.
yeah,
Okay. So when we see a scammer and we see all of this, Brian, do you remember that recent Hollywood assassination of, I can't even with straight face go on, that you needed to carry an MP5 and have, trained 500-pound
yeah,
bench
no,
presser?
no.
Those things don't happen. That's not it. So if you're going to talk to me about mitigation and about litigation, and you're going to talk to me about the future and the training. These shows too. I tell you all the time, I watch that gosh darn free hunting show, and watching the guy with the appendix carry aim point sight, and he's got the backup because now he's got the true sight and the aim point sight, and those two things together. If you do a fraction of a thing at 7 yards and roll around on the ground, Brian, I love people. Go train, go lift weights, go do all that. You're not moving the dial one way or the other. You're not changing the outcome. You're not making the world a safer place. The idea is you've got to fight these types of arguments. This is the type of discussion you need to have if you want to make the world safer for our kids. And I'm not proselytizing. I'm not standing on a soapbox. I'm saying honestly,
that sounded like a bit like a rant.
Yeah.
No, I get that, and I get what you're saying. It's again, it's another example of focusing on the wrong things.
All the wrong things.
Like,
yes.
But it makes it. But back to what I said, it certainly makes me feel like I'm more prepared. It makes me feel like this is the right thing. But that
argument is just because it makes you feel right doesn't mean it's the right thing to do.
It's just like the data science argument. We were talking about the other day, and how we all as humans are sort of in a little bit way of a data scientist, how we look at things. Now we just do it in a horrible, illogical manner. And one of the things is when you find, people find like, hey, we looked into this and it's kind of showing us something that's counterintuitive. I'm like, you're probably onto something. That's probably the right way to do it. Because why? Because
slow down, stay there for a minute.
Our intuitive way is often wrong, because that's just it. Well, here I've got this thing. This is going to help me. And it's like, look, you may be well-intentioned and well-meaning and well-funded and well-researched, but it's not going to solve this problem right here.
Exactly.
And
exactly.
So, but that's where I'm going with this prosecution.
Yes.
Like, what are we doing?
So my argument is this. All of your training has failed if I have to shoot you. Okay. I failed in all of my mitigation and all of my sense making and problem solving and everything else. There's the rare time that I'm going to have to shoot you where all of those things had to fail, and it's going to be so rare, it's going to be remarkable. Case in point, Titanic. This gosh damn argument coming around because the Avatar's movie's out. Would the kid have lived on the door? Would he have died on the door?
On the raft?
Number one. Yeah.
Where the girl, she didn't give him any room on the floating piece of wood?
Number one, you got too much time on your hand.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Number two, Brian, simple question. How many life vests were there on the Titanic?
Right.
And how many passengers?
They didn't have enough
so
boats and vests.
If you knew that you didn't have the vest and you didn't have the boats, yet that ship sailed, then you're complicit. You knew or you should have known. You're part of the problem. And that's what we're doing now, Brian, is we're saying, yeah, but that's okay. Yeah, we don't want to meet that standard. We want to meet this one. Why? Because it's dangling right in front of us and kids died. And anytime kids die or a dog dies, look at the old Yeller. We cry our asses off and we got to do something about it. And don't continue to tell me that the violence films and movies and look, even violent gosh darn news broadcasts, even the weather forecast, millions are left powerless. What we're doing is we're scaring the shit out of people, and that's not helping you psychologically or sociologically, because now you're suspect of everybody. You got to get out of your house. You got to fight the good fight. This is something you need to be protesting for.
So let's what do you think is going to be, just knowing what we know right now, the outcome of these cases, right? Let's say like you think probably the Oxford shooter, his parents' case, because I actually forgot what they're even charging them with.
The parental influence and the neglect and allowing and all that stuff, they're going to be found guilty. The thing is that they're going to be found guilty for all the wrong reasons. They're just like the Highland Park.
It sounds like it like ends justification here, or
right?
Something.
What they're going to do is they're going to say, "See, we told you we were going to be able to do it." Then over the next 11 years, I predict that we're going to have side cases and forward cases, and they're going to be in jail and out of jail, and somebody's finally going to come up with the answer. And SCOTUS is going to look at it and go, "That's legal." That follows what the constitutional guidelines were. But there's going to be a lot of missteps before that. So I like what the Michigan court said. Hey, let's fight this out in court. Then we'll pick up the pieces, because it's the most logical way to do that, because that's almost scientific in its approach.
It sounds like this is something that case is going to be going for the next 10 years with appeals and going up to state Supreme Courts and maybe all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. I think it's going to be fought out, like you said. And I guess that's what they're trying to do, which that has to be done legally, right? I mean, meaning if we're going to
So
go
we
into this
fix things that
area,
are broke.
well,
Yeah,
if we're going to go into this area, we have to create precedent. What is the right way to do it? It's going to have to argue back and forth several times. It's going to have to get kicked
exactly.
down and then go back up. And then people, and from that, we'll get whatever the answer is going forward. But that
Yep.
is certainly going to take some time. And I think the same thing with the Highland Park. And then there's going to be more cases after this, knowing, now people seeing that when it happens again, when something happens, it's going to continue. So there's going to be more cases on
Yes.
top of that. Some may go faster than others. Some may be easier or less complex than others. You know what I'm saying? But
Right.
but I think I don't know. I just don't. If we're doing this just to make ourselves feel better, then it's for the wrong
Then we're
reason.
wrong. We're wrong.
It's
And
just
and I'll tell you this. You remember the limo caper a couple of years ago? All those folks died in a limo, the fiery accident.
the
Okay,
party bus thing, that
yeah,
big
yeah,
one. Yeah, it was
yeah.
at the East Coast or something. Yeah.
Yes, when that comes down to it, this is what I want folks to start thinking. Critical thinking means comparative analysis to similar incidents. What happened is those people got along a long time with not getting their vehicles maintained, not having a stringent standard for driver training, not doing this. And guess what? All of those things led to a night that has impacted so many people and so many died, and millions, if not $1 billion worth of court costs and fining. What Brian and I are telling you is if you take a look at likely outcomes, the most likely course of action will never turn around and bite you in the ass. It's not anticipating the most dangerous course of action. So when you sit down and your kid is going, hey, where are you guys going Friday night? Okay. You got to think, what do you
Yeah.
got planned? Right. You
Yeah.
got to do a little bit of that creative thinking, Brian. And
Yeah.
so when the kid comes to you and says, yeah, I'm thinking about that Ruger 9mm might be a great target pistol. Well, you know what? I got an air gun here that you can do with a Crossman BB gun at
Yeah.
a target inside the house, and it's much cheaper, and you can't kill Billy down the street with it. You
Right.
get where I'm going?
Yeah.
Brian, that's all critical thinking. That's all using a metric design, not just age, because age can be, some person can be more mature for their age, and it's not about
Yeah.
the gun manufacturer; it's about the gun design. It's shitty things like that. Why would you stockpile? Why would you keep a journal? Why would you ever go the idea of me wanting to visit a place where other violence has occurred?
Yeah.
I can't imagine that, right? And so
Well,
all of those earmarks that something might be wrong with your kid, if you fail to listen to them, then we're going to be taking care of your kid for the rest of his life or executing him,
yeah.
and that blows.
It does, and again, it goes back to we have these emotional reactions and want to right wrongs, and
Yep.
you can't when something happens and it happens, and you have to process it correctly, and
Yes.
the application or the way you're going about preventing it may not always be the right way. I mean, there's that's still societally how we talk about all kinds of things in the U.S. is, well, this was wrong. Okay, well, if that was 75 years ago, what do we do about it today?
Yes.
How do we prevent? We can prevent something like, knowing what we know now, we can prevent something like that from happening. But what are we supposed to do about the people who are affected by it? That's tough. That's not easy.
Yeah,
These
it is tough.
conversations are not easy to have. But like you can't just arbitrarily assign value to different situations or different circumstances and say, hey, see, this is what it was. If it's
No,
no, you just
because you
can't do that.
can't base it on emotion, and you can't base it on a number of other factors that are less tangible and less scientific. What you can base it on is the process. Brian, we know certain things that we did in the past were wrong, and we're going to fix the process so they don't ever happen
Happen
again.
again.
That's
Right.
noble, Brian. That's noble. And
That's yeah,
that's what constitutional amendments are about,
yeah,
and that's what the
exactly.
law is about. Do some people misapply it?
Yep.
Was there a thing called the KKK? Were there lynch mobs? Yes, but guess what? There's less now, and as a
Yeah.
society, we're doing much better. So I say, in these situations that you brought up today, let's focus on making the process sound and rational and legal and best for society, right? Rather than going in saying, well, because what we want to do is we want to make somebody pay for those dead kids in that classroom, or for those people in
Yeah.
that grocery store, or
Yeah.
for that person killed. But guess what? When they're killed by a DUI, we've got a less of a standard, don't we? I mean, think about it. DUI
That's,
crashes all the
I
time.
mean, that
They're
was
flat out.
that's a perfect example. They've tried to go after, you know, restaurants and bars and stuff
Yeah,
before for someone who was overserved. I'm doing air quotes right there.
I hate air quotes,
Again,
guys.
but the idea is that we look at all these different contributing factors to that, and then we handle that much differently than we do something
Yes,
like this. Mostly, because intent was not there on a DUI crash versus something else. But yeah, I mean that's again that we kind of arbitrarily pick and choose, and you can't do that with the law. You can't that's not how it works. You're not supposed to do that with the process and the system. It has to
right.
follow a set of principles and protocols and procedures, right? You don't get to just say, well, no, this is who we're going after now because that's who I think, because I'm angry and I
Because
want to
that's
take it
not
out.
how a civilized society operates.
Yeah.
And stability in a civilized society, this isn't Lord of the Flies. This isn't the effing Maze Runner and all this horse shit that's out there.
Yeah.
What we're trying to say is it's more like the stock market, Brian. We want to do what's the best for the most people for the longest period of time. And do things go sideways once in a while? Yeah. And that's what appellate courts are for, and specifically the Supreme Court is to correct those. I like the way that you said that. Now, just because something's corrected doesn't mean that it's going to pay backwards, but it may pay today and it may pay forwards. And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, that's hugely important.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good place to sort of bring it in for a landing on.
I don't even remember what you started talking about. Talking about we both had our rant periods just before Christmas. I feel better, Brian. I feel a lot better. Brown
Well,
dog, brown dog.
over
Yeah,
here listening to this, you're having a wonderful Christmas,
we
or
really do.
actually we're still recording. It's Hanukkah's going on right now too as well.
Yep.
This will be out during
Second
that time
day.
too. So, or any holiday that you choose or choose not to celebrate.
Yes.
Hopefully get some time with family or break from work. If you don't celebrate any of these holidays, take advantage of the fact that other people do and are not
Yes.
focused on working. So chill.
And be careful
Yeah.
too on the roads and when you go shopping.
Yeah.
Brian, I would say this. I would say if anybody wants to help Arcadia coming into the next year, invest in Townhouse crackers because Marin's dad is arriving today, and apparently he only
They
took a
are.
cracker that bastard eats.
They've been slowly
How
sending
many boxes did he send?
various crackers, various
Uh,
meats and various, you dried or cured salted meats to the house that I'm just like, what the hell is this?
he sent me a box of fish. I
I don't
love your
know, man.
father, but there was no note, nothing. It was a cardboard box frozen to the bejesus, loaded with fish. What a wonderful man.
Apparently my parents don't think we have stores near where I live. But
The Townhouse crackers. I saw at least 4 or 5 boxes
oh yeah,
inside
yeah.
that other
There's a
box.
half a dozen
That's great.
boxes of those specific type of crackers, I guess. So
God bless him.
yeah.
God bless him. It's better than 5 or 6 bottles of gin.
We got those too. I was just as long as we got plenty of booze
I'm
in the
sorry.
house, we'll be
I'm sorry.
fine.
I didn't mean to bring that up.
I had to go purchase those. So
That's
in
great.
preparation. But all right. Well, I
Yeah, be
guess,
safe. Do great things
yeah,
out there.
everyone,
Come
I
on.
hope you have we'll be back right after the holidays. So hope everyone's doing well, and please don't forget that training changes behavior.